Report: DHS Division failed to analyze intelligence ahead of Capitol violence. For months, officials have been saying the January 6th attack on Capitol was the result of a classic intelligence failure. Now key officials are questioning whether that was the case. A report written by the former head of intelligence at the New York Police Department, Mitch Silver, entitled Domestic Violence Extremism and the Intelligence Challenge, makes clear that the officials at the FBI, DHS, and other agencies had collected plenty of intelligence leading up to the insurrection at the Capitol. What they failed to do was analyze it. Intelligence collection did not fail. Silver writes, an analysis for the Atlantic Council obtained by NPR before its publication next week. In fact, it was robust. Rather, the failure was in the analysis of the intelligence and the failure of senior government officials to issue warnings based on that intelligence. This could explain why a little-known division of DHS called the Office of Intelligence and Analysis, or INA, is now receiving so much attention. In addition to the upcoming report, the Senate's Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee is devoting a hearing on May 18th to INA, and it will focus on what the Intelligence Division was doing in the run-up to the Capitol attack. IA's job is to create these threat assessments so that its consumers have a better sense of how to deploy resources, how to think about what the threat may be, said Juliette Kaim, a former assistant secretary at DHS. It basically was intended to be a customer of intelligence. The next job is to analyze that intelligence and pass that along to local law enforcement. A key part of INA's job is to provide a written analysis of possible threats to public events before they happen. These threat assessments aren't just done for the gatherings that have potential for violence, like the Light March that happened in Charlottesville in 2017. Instead, these assessments are produced as a matter of course even for events like the Kentucky Derby or the New Orleans Jazz Fest. But as NPR has previously reported, the threat assessment that would have put everyone on notice ahead of the Capitol insurrection never came. Even though the FBI, DHS, and the New York Police Department, among others, all had the information they needed to see that the pro-Trump rally ahead of the election certification would likely erupt in violence. When we think about an intelligence agency, they have three functions: collect the intelligence, analyze the intelligence, connect the dots. Then you want the appropriate authorities so they can take some action to mitigate what you think is coming. Silver told NPR in an interview, and if you look at the number 2 and number 3, analyze and warning, it is a clear failure from DHS. Former DHS officials and the intelligence analysts interviewed by the NPR make plain that anyone looking for what went wrong ahead of January 6 should start with I&A. It turns out that despite its critical role in identifying threats here at home, I&A is fraught with issues. First, officials told NPR that I&A is full of people from other departments and working there is not seen as a firm assignment. If you're 23 years old and you wanted to get into the intelligence business, the fun stuff, you are not picking DHS. And that has been the struggle for the department from the beginning, said Keim. Within the intelligence agencies, I&A was not an equal partner. It might not even have been viewed as a cousin. It was a distant friend that you tolerated who showed up to the party. Analysts said leadership has also had a role in the failures at I&A. As a general matter, the administration in power sets the priorities for the agency. Radicalized youth potentially intent on attacking the homeland, for example, was a big priority during the Obama administration as ISIS began to recruit in the US and in the wake of the Paris attacks in 2015. For the Trump administration, it was made clear at DHS that the top priority was the border with Mexico. Trump administration officials wanted DHS to focus on immigration and perceived threat emanating from there. What that meant is that the intelligence analysis at I&A was talked toward their priorities. Todd Rosenbaum, a former deputy and Undersecretary of Intelligence at DHS who still has contact in the department, said he believed DHS analysts were under pressure to fall into line. So even as the intelligence was growing that violent extremists on the right were rallying supporters around January 6, analysts at I&A were encouraged to find threats in other quarters. For example, the Trump administration was focused on the loose movement of activists known as Antifa, which gets its name from a contraction for anti-fascism. Antifa doesn't have a leader or the defined structure, but former President Trump said they should be defined as a domestic terrorism group and sought to blame the group for clashes with police during the protests against racial justice that raged across the country in the run-up to the 2020 election. Administration officials were insisting on a narrative that wasn't there, which made it far harder for I&A, Rosenbaum said of the official during the Trump administration. You had the president screaming, Antifa is behind all this. And anyone who's actually doing the analysis of this knew that was an utter falsehood. And DHS was very much aligned in accommodating the president. What that meant What that means is that although there were plenty of red lights flashing, low intelligence from the NYPD, warning from the FBI, and threats on social media that all the world could see. I&A never put it all together. Rosenbaum faults not just the pressure to find threats from the left, but says he sees a failure of imagination as part of the problem too. The analysts at I&A were reluctant to countenance that the demonstration in Washington convened by a president could go so horribly wrong. The dots were all there, Rosenbaum said. Absolutely. But I mean, I'm among the many who could not conceive of an insurrection against the Capitol being led by the President of the United States. For Mitch Silver, the riot is a wake-up call. We need to retool our focus in intelligence and retool the way we've looked at the threats, certainly for the last 20 years. We've sort of been externally facing, and now we have to take a look within our borders for people who would do the country harm. And that's a different type of challenge. The Biden administration announced last week that it would be forcing a new branch within I&A to focus on domestic terrorism. The House, for its part, had started its own bipartisan effort to form a commission to examine the riot. Among other things, it could produce something like a 9/11 Commission report so the world can better understand why the event of January 6th unfolded as they did.